When the storm clouds of war gathered, the American colonies were in no position to fight the greatest land and naval power in the world, the British Empire. The colonials had no navy, no standing army, just a collection of colonial militias that were not a traditional standardized force, and of course we had no Marine Corps. Foreign assistance to aid the colonies in their desire to be free came in many forms, such as foreign military officers like the Prussian Baron von Steuben, the French Marquis de Lafayette, and Polish Casimir Pulaski, and a Scottish fugitive from British justice, John Paul Jones. These foreigners helped create and train the American forces in the great struggle to come, but one would stand out. Who was John Paul Jones? Why was he critical to the colonial forces? What did he actually do to create what would become the United States Navy? What happened to him after the American Revolution?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
John Paul Jones was born John Paul on July 6, 1747 in Kirkcudbright, Scotland, under the name of John Paul, the Jones being added later. And coming from a very modest family with few prospects, he signed on into the British Merchant Marine and went to sea for the first time as a cabin boy at age 12. He spent many years at sea and learned all the skills required of an able seaman, and also became a master navigator, after which he became first mate on a brigantine slave ship collecting their human cargo off the coast of West Africa. Being personally appalled by the slave trade, he transferred to a merchantman in 1766 and was appointed a ship's master in 1769. His problems began when in 1773 he faced a mutiny aboard ship while anchored in Tobago. Depending upon the source and story, the leader of the mutiny attacked him with a bludgeon, and he killed the man in self-defense with either a pistol or sword. The British Admiralty took an interest and wanted a formal trial. The dead man apparently had powerful business friends in London. It was apparent that John Paul would probably not receive a fair trial, as the crew who mutinied would be called to testify. Others on the ship who supported his case as witnesses were removed from the ship and scattered to other ships so as to be unavailable as defense witnesses. John Paul saw what was coming and that he would not receive a fair trial, so he fled to Virginia and was listed as a fugitive from justice by the British government, which was why he added the surname Jones. Jones had landed in the colonies at just the right time, as they were in the early stages of breaking away from Great Britain. As a wanted man, he fit right in with the rebellious colonial leadership, who were also considered criminals and traitors. In 1775, Jones arrived in Philadelphia and signed on to the Continental Navy, which was just in its birthing stage, and received his commission as a lieutenant on the first American flagship, the sloop Alfred. Jones was also very knowledgeable of the Royal Navy's tactics and methods. He met with the colonial leadership and laid out his vision as to what the Continental Navy needed to have a chance at winning the coming war. He told them that due to the time required and the great expense and resources required, they would need to build a frigate fleet. His argument was that the Americans would never be able to build the ships of the line, the battleships of their day, with between 74 and 100 guns or more. They could build 4 fast, well-armed frigates instead for the same cost as one ship of the line and in far shorter time. He also suggested that the Americans adopt a seagoing fighting force, such as the British had with their Royal Marines, who maintained a discipline and order on their warships and also operated as an amphibious landing force. An American officer, Samuel Nichols, was also of the same mindset, and following the meeting with Jones, the Continental Congress commissioned Nichols to raise 2 battalions of seafaring warriors, in essence, creating a corps of Marines. In a place called Tun Tavern in Philadelphia, on November 10, 1775, Samuel Nichols appointed Robert Mullen, who owned Tun Tavern, as the first U.S. Marine recruiter, while Nichols interviewed the prospects and vetted their qualifications. Jones's argument was taken seriously. He had his Marines and was instrumental in the building of the heavily armed frigates. Along with his experience and powers of persuasion, Jones was quickly promoted to captain in 1776 and given command of the lightly gunned but very fast sloop USS Providence. His bravery and willingness to take great risks were duly noted, and his advice was often sought. By the end of October, Congress authorized the purchase of outfitting 4 armed vessels. On December 3, the USS Alfred, USS Andrew, USS Doria, USS Cabot, and USS Columbus, and later the USS Providence, USS Wasp, and USS Alliance joined the small fleet. Some of these ships were refitted merchantmen. On December 22, 1775, Admiral Essex Hopkins was appointed the naval commander-in-chief, and officers of the Navy were commissioned. John Paul Jones was one of the first commissioned fleet officers serving under him. In March 1776, this small fleet, complemented by the Providence and Wasp, Hopkins led the first major naval action of the Continental Navy against Nassau, Bahamas, where stores of much-needed gunpowder were seized for the use of the Continental Army and Navy. On April 6, 1776, the squadron, including USS Fly, unsuccessfully encountered the 20-gun HMS Glasgow in the first major sea battle of the Continental Navy, where Marine sharpshooters were stationed in the fighting tops of the ship's masts and targeting enemy officers, naval gunners, and helmsmen. Jones's plan was for the Marines to conduct 2 amphibious landings in Nassau, in the Bahamas, to seize naval stores from the British, with the first landing led by Captain Nichols, with 250 Marines and sailors who landed in New Providence, in the Bahamas, destroying installations and capturing gunpowder and food supplies. The second landing, led by Lieutenant Trevette, landed at night and captured several ships at anchor along with the supplies. Congress then authorized the addition of 13 frigates to be specifically constructed as warships rather than refitting merchantmen. While on his first cruise aboard USS Providence, Jones's seamanship saw his crew destroy British fisheries in Nova Scotia and capture 16 ships as prizes, which were later reflagged as American vessels and put to good use. On November 2, 1777, Jones was in command of the newly built USS Ranger with a crew of 140 men. They departed from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, headed to the naval port at Brest, France. Bringing the USS Ranger into port in France, the American ship was saluted by the French Admiral La Motte Piquet, making USS Ranger the first American vessel ever to be recognized by a foreign power. After reprovisioning with food and water, they sailed into the Irish Sea and began raiding on British targets. Targeting merchantmen and fishing vessels, he hoped to damage their economy. During 1777 and 1778, Ranger operated in British home waters, and Jones, with his Marines, led daring raids on English and Scottish shore installations, destroying buildings and capturing powder and shot. The Continental Congress was impressed with his audacity and success, and in recognition of these successes, he was placed in overall command of 5 French and American vessels. The French had refitted an East India merchant ship launched in 1766, the Duc de Duras, into a new frigate, the Bonhomme Richard, or Goodman Richard, named after Benjamin Franklin's pamphlet character in his Poor Richard's Almanac, and Jones always carried a copy with him. Jones led his small squadron on his new flagship, Bonhomme Richard, formally named, and they succeeded into the capture of 7 merchantmen off the Scottish coast. On September 23, 1779, Jones and his ship fought one of the bloodiest engagements in U.S. naval history with the 44-gun Navy frigate Serapis. The HMS Serapis was a Royal Navy 2-decked Roebuck-class fifth-rate, or frigate, commanded by Captain Richard Pearson. She was a new ship launched in early 1779 and, at that time, was armed with 50 guns. The Bonhomme Richard, with 380 officers and enlisted sailors and Marines, mounted 42 guns, and being an older ship, was vulnerable to below-the-waterline cannonball penetration. Jones's aggressive action almost ended in disaster, and after exchanging broadsides, with his own vessel burning and sinking, Captain Pearson of Serapis, seeing the sinking American ship, requested that Jones surrender, but Jones did not accept the British demand, replying, "I have not yet begun to fight." Jones then crashed his ship into the Serapis, and his crew tied the two ships together as his Marines threw themselves onto the larger British ship's deck. 3 hours later, after severe hand-to-hand combat with the American Marines sweeping the deck with musket fire and leading a boarding party, the Serapis surrendered, and Jones took control and transferred his flag. When the Bonhomme Richard sank, Jones took command of Serapis. This engagement made headlines on both continents, and it was one of the factors following the American victory at Saratoga 2 years earlier that convinced France to get heavily involved with assisting the colonies against their mutual enemy. He was praised by the Americans and the French, while the British, learning who he was, wrote about him as a pirate, a bloody butcher, and a common criminal, and they compared him to Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, and put a price on his head. The writings about him from his contemporaries, such as Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, described him as well-dressed, carried a sword, and conducted himself with practiced decorum. He had a Scottish brogue and a light Celtic feature. He was intense about his honor and his duties, and was a harsh military master, but was also surprisingly sociable. Thomas Jefferson was an admirer and thought good of him after their meeting, and others referred to him as Little Jones, as he stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, and he was a prolific poem and letter writer, spoke some French, and, though he never married, was involved in many romances. Jones found that after the United States won its independence, there was a lot of political infighting, and there was probably a lot of personal jealousy against him, so he moved on to other efforts. In 1788, Russian Empress Catherine the Great wanted to increase Russia's naval capabilities and appointed Jones as a rear admiral, in which he saw action in the Liman campaign in the Black Sea against the Turks. Following his duty for Russia in 1789, he moved to Paris and was appointed as the U.S. consul to Algiers, but he died before the commission arrived. His body was buried in Paris. In 1905, after a lengthy search, his grave was discovered and removed from the gravesite in Paris and brought to the United States due to the efforts of President Theodore Roosevelt. John Paul Jones's remains were reinterred in an ornate tomb at the Naval Academy Chapel at Annapolis, Maryland in 1913. In his honor, commissioned in 1991, the USS John Paul Jones DDG-53 is the latest destroyer named in honor of Jones. 3 previous ships were also named after him. Other ships named after John Paul Jones were the Paul Jones, a side-wheel steam gunboat, the Paul Jones DD-10, the Paul Jones DD-230, the John Paul Jones DD-932, and John Paul Jones DDG-53. John Paul Jones is regarded as the father of the United States Navy and was a catalyst for the creation of the United States Marine Corps. He helped us secure our freedom from Great Britain, and his legend is secure.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.